The moment I entered, the room fell into utter silence. This wasn't the warm kind of hush you might expect. It was a chilling stillness, as if every breath had been completely siphoned away. My mother, Margot Blackwell, stopped laughing, her champagne glass shaking between her fingers. My brother, Lucas Blackwell, stared at me as though he was gazing at an apparition. In reality, for him, that's exactly what I was. The Blackwell family reunion had never been planned with my presence in mind. According to everyone, I shouldn't have been standing there at all. I advanced a single step into the room. The heels, unused for months, echoed sharply on the polished wood beneath me. Aunt Lorraine Barrett's eyes grew large, but it wasn't out of fear. It was the look of recognition, because she understood. Aunt Lorraine had always understood. I kept quiet, at least for the moment. I let their gazes linger on me. Silent questions curled through the room like drifting smoke. Where has she been? How could she possibly still be alive? Why has she returned? Then my eyes landed on him. My father, Franklin Blackwell, stood unmoving, his face expressionless and silent. His jaw was set so firmly, I worried it might actually break. He didn't so much as blink. My mother, Margot Blackwell, was the one who finally spoke up. Her words came out frail and trembling. "Vivian," she whispered it, the way someone might utter a prayer, clinging to the hope that saying my name could somehow undo her actions. I cocked my head, letting the seconds drag on. When the pause stretched on endlessly, I flashed a smile and raised my voice so everyone present could hear me. "You told everyone I ran away." A sharp intake of breath swept through the room. There was a sudden crash of breaking glass somewhere nearby. I heard a baby begin to wail. Scanning the space, I took in the familiar faces of people who had acted as if I'd never been there at all. At that moment, I let the truth surge up inside me, burning at my throat. "Are you ready for the real story?" I said. "Let me explain. My name is Vivian Blackwell, and I remember everything. Well before the hush, before glass splintered and false tears started, there was our kitchen. The kitchen always carried the same familiar scent, the smell of lemon cleaner mingled with tension in the air. Each Sunday morning, my mother, Margot Blackwell, would scrub the counters relentlessly 3 times, muttering about appearances as if someone would come to scrutinize us. But nobody ever actually visited. Her voice was sharp enough to cut bone, harsh, cold, and always trembling on the brink of spite. "You're so unappreciative, Vivian. Do you ever consider the effort I put in?" It made no difference whether I was arranging dinnerware or merely breathing a little too loudly. Somehow I was perpetually overwhelming, yet always insufficient. My father, Franklin Blackwell, would position himself behind the Weekly Gazette, always sheltered by that wretched Weekly Gazette. I never really knew what he looked at. Maybe it just served as his shield. And then there was my brother, Lucas Blackwell, my older sibling. He was the shining example, football captain, excelling in his classes. He never once faced any punishment, not a single occasion. If I came home 15 minutes past curfew, I became the issue. When Lucas smashed my father's car into the mailbox, my mother simply baked cupcakes and described the whole thing as a lesson in personal growth. I didn't feel much anger then. Mostly, I just felt worn out. When I reached 22, I had enrolled at Starkridge Technical Institute and took late shifts at Lou's 24-hour grill on Harrison Road. My work nights would wrap up by 3:10 a.m. I dragged myself home, completely exhausted, and still ended up getting chastised if I missed cleaning my shoes. That evening, yes, that one, began with scorched toast and ended with a slap across the cheek. "You are not about to ruin your future like a mere server," she threw at me, her words harsh, piercing, and wounding. My hand trembled as I pulled on my jacket. The light above the porch flickered as I stepped out into the darkness. I convinced myself that a short walk around the neighborhood would help me clear my thoughts. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. The chill in the air was biting. Each breath turned into a frosty mist. It was already late, the empty streets silent except for the distant drone of streetlights. Still, my mind was a storm, thoughts hammering against my head. I had no idea that would be the final moment I saw my house for 11 months. I didn't realize someone dear to me would be driving that car. I truly had no clue that all of them would act like nothing happened. They all believed I'd never return. Yet that was all in the past. Before the blood, the coma, every deception, and before my memory came flooding back, the noise of the car is lost to me. What I do recall is the cold creeping through my jeans and filling my shoes. I remember how the quiet of the road felt endless, as if I had stepped right off the planet's edge. The street lamps overhead hummed, their light wavering as though they couldn't decide whether to illuminate my path. I had my hands shoved deep in my coat pockets, my knuckles white from how tightly I balled them. My mother's words still echoed in my mind. "You're pathetic, Vivian. Just like your father's relatives." I had no idea what that was supposed to imply. All I understood was the pain. I rounded the corner near the old gas station, abandoned since I was 13. That's when headlights appeared before me. They were moving rapidly, way too rapidly. I couldn't even react in time. I experienced it, a searing flash, almost like being struck by lightning. My body was tossed into the air, and then there was just emptiness, only darkness. When I regained consciousness, nothing felt right. The ceiling shone too brightly, the sheets felt rigid, and my mouth was as parched as sandpaper. Wires snaked from my arms, machines emitted steady beeps, and Rosa Montgomery, the nurse, hovered somewhere on the edge of my vision. "Hi," she murmured. "You're safe. This is Riverbend Memorial Hospital. You've been unconscious for some time." I tried to form words but failed. No sound escaped. My throat burned, as if I'd inhaled flames. "Try not to worry," Rosa said softly. I had been in an accident. A hit and run with no identification on me. I'd been here for nearly 24 days. 24 days. That couldn't possibly be correct. Surely somebody would have shown up by now. Someone must be searching for me, right? Yet nobody arrived. No phone calls, no bouquets, no recognizable voices. They had run a tiny notice in the Weekly Gazette. "Unknown young woman found unconscious on Harrison Road," but nobody responded. And I couldn't even recall who I was. The physicians labeled it retrograde amnesia, short-term memory loss from head injury. I still remembered things like shades and melodies, but my birthday was missing, my parents' identities were gone, and my own sense of self had vanished. Occasionally, fleeting images surfaced: a woman shouting, a car door being slammed shut, the scent of cinnamon toast, though these fragments never added up. I felt like a fresh page, a mystery that nobody cared to solve. They transferred me to Greencrest Recovery Center. I spent my time learning all over again how to eat, how to walk, and how to form complete sentences when I spoke. The nurses, though gentle, would glance at me with sympathy, as though I were a story meant to inspire pity. Just a Jane Doe to them, I felt invisible, until a certain night when a song began to play on the TV. It was Silver Horizon's Landslide. In that moment, I felt as if something inside me fractured. Suddenly, memories began to surface. It all started with that song, Silver Horizon, playing on the small television mounted above my hospital bed. It was the sort of tune that made my chest clench up, even before I knew the reason for it. Can I handle the seasons of my life? I didn't know exactly what triggered it. Whether it was the tune itself, the singer's voice, or hearing Rosa Montgomery, the nurse, hum along, a part of me abruptly broke open. Then I had a sudden image, not music, but cinnamon toast, followed by the sight of a woman's hand dropping a plate down with force. Margot Blackwell, my mother. I remembered the sound her rings made tapping against the dish. Next came a rush of noise, harsh voices, shouting, and the slamming of doors. Cold air brushed against my skin. The pavement was firm beneath my feet. The glow of the street lamp cast harsh shadows. And then there were blinding headlights, and a familiar face. My body jerked so sharply that the heart monitor's beeping faltered. Rosa Montgomery, my nurse, hurried in and asked if I was hurting. I told her no. I said that I had remembered something. The following day, Dr. Helen Kim, my therapist, was brought in to see me. She asked gentle questions, encouraging me to let my memories come gradually, like waves. Yet my recollections didn't arrive like waves at all. Instead, they poured in all at once, like a deluge. Every evening, new memories returned. Lou's 24-hour grill, the greasy scent left on my hand, the porch light with its cracked cover. My mother, Margot Blackwell, slapping me. Afterward, my brother, Lucas Blackwell, offered me his insincere, apologetic grin. And then everything suddenly became clear. The car. The person driving. It wasn't an unknown face. It was Lucas. My own brother. His face was illuminated by the headlights, his eyes staring, mouth forming what looked like a shouted warning. I noticed the emblem on his hoodie, the red varsity R from the Oak Hill High School football squad. I recalled watching him drink heavily at my cousin Megan's party earlier in the evening. I thought about how my mother, Margot Blackwell, had allowed him to take my father, Franklin Blackwell's car, even though he was unsteady walking down the front porch steps. It was my brother. He struck me with the car and never stopped to help. He simply kept on going. I spent countless hours trying to persuade myself I must be mistaken. That maybe my mind was distorting things, merging different moments. But the memory felt vivid. Much too vivid. Then the voice came back to me, belonging to my father. Don't utter a word about what happened that night, Lucas. She had no business being out there in the first place. I remembered hearing those words. I remembered lying on the sofa, still hurting, still groggy, and overhearing him say that to my brother. They were aware. The two of them understood exactly what had happened. And yet they told everyone I had run away, that I was unstable, over-emotional, and a disgrace. My existence was erased by their silence. I acted as if my disappearance had been intentional. Meanwhile, I had actually spent all that time confined to a bed at Riverbend Memorial Hospital, injured, dismissed, but perfectly aware of every detail. That evening, I raised myself upright, gazing through the glass. I was determined not just to keep living, I intended to reclaim my place. It would not be a quiet return, not a gentle one, and certainly not with any intent to pardon. Riverbend Memorial Hospital made a final effort to reach my relatives. Almost a full month had gone by. I was able to walk once more. Eating was something I could handle on my own. I was now capable of speaking my entire name and wouldn't lose track midway. I am 22 years old, a daughter, a sibling, and very much alive. Grace Templeton, the social worker, dialed the contact number I had provided for emergencies. It was my mother, Margot Blackwell, who picked up. Though I wasn't able to overhear what was said, it was plain on Rosa Montgomery's face as she listened in. The way her gaze tightened, how her lips pressed themselves into a thin line. After she ended the call, she regarded me as if all my family ties had suddenly been severed. She said, "You ran away." Rosa Montgomery, the nurse, quietly told me, "You had always been considered unstable, and contact was not something they wanted." I gazed at her in disbelief. part of me felt like bursting out laughing. Another part of me wanted to unleash a scream. Instead of reacting, I simply asked her to say it again. They had no interest in having any contact. That was all it took for me to suddenly become invisible. Nobody had reported me as missing. No one had called any hospitals. They hadn't even glanced at the Weekly Gazette. But what they did was gossip. My aunt, Aunt Lorraine Barrett, the only person who ever truly met my gaze, would later reveal everything to me. According to my mother, Margot Blackwell, I had left in the middle of the night after a psychological crisis. She told the rest of our relatives that I was erratic, had turned down help, and had run off barefoot, refusing to say a word to anyone. She spoke about it as if it were a terrible disgrace, treating my family as though we were the ones who had suffered. And everyone accepted her story. They organized a candlelit vigil in the Grace Fellowship Hall basement. My brother delivered a speech, tears streaming down his face and all. He said, "Vivian, wherever you might be, we wish for you to find peace. Peace." Meanwhile, as I lay in a bed at Riverbend Memorial Hospital, hooked up to monitors and struggling to relearn how to grasp a spoon, they cleared out my bedroom, gave away my clothing, donated my books as literary donations, and erased me as if I had never belonged to their family at all. Later on, I came across a photograph, a family portrait snapped just weeks after the crash. My brother Lucas was grinning, his arms draped around our mother Margot Blackwell and our father Franklin Blackwell. We were all gathered at Cedar Brook Lake Cabin, the very place I had cherished during my childhood, the very place I couldn't even talk about without being labeled selfish. As I gazed at their faces, a chilling realization struck me. They were doing just fine. They were actually better off without me. And here I was, alive, yet apparently nothing but a burden. That night, I perched at the edge of my Riverbend Memorial Hospital bed, the call button gripped in one hand and my release documents clutched in the other. If they wanted to act as if I had vanished, I figured I'd give them an idea of what it means for someone to return from oblivion. It was Aunt Lorraine Barrett who revealed the truth to me. She arrived for a visit on a rainy Wednesday, long after the staff seemed convinced not a single person would bother to come see me. My aunt appeared gaunter, exhausted, but the embrace she gave felt genuine. "I didn't accept what they said," I murmured. I didn't believe any of it. I sat on the old vinyl sofa beside the window, while the rain softly struck the panes. She squeezed my hand in a way no one else had since the crash, making me feel real and present. That's when she began to speak. "They let everyone think you'd left out of disgrace." Aunt Lorraine told me that I was too volatile, overly sensitive, and no longer fit to remain with the family. I fixed my gaze on her. Did anyone bother to question that? Aunt Lorraine shook her head. They had no interest in finding out the reasons. She said she had tried to intervene. She asked where they imagined I had disappeared to, wondered why a missing person report was never filed. Margot, my mother, snapped at her and told her she was only making matters worse. Yet the most painful part wasn't the lie they spread to outsiders. It was the story they fed to themselves. Franklin, my father, knew that Lucas had taken the car that night. He knew Lucas had been drinking alcohol. He was aware of the truth. He was always aware. And he still allowed them to lay the blame on me. He called it an accident, Aunt Lorraine told me gently. She said I shouldn't have been out that late in dark clothing. I can recall laughing at that. My laughter rang out, brittle and hollow. They smothered me beneath the weight of their own remorse, and they labeled it grief. They organized charity events in my name. My mother, Margot Blackwell, put on tears for the congregation at Grace Fellowship Hall. Lucas Blackwell posted an old picture of us from when I was 13, adding, "Miss you, sis." All I wanted was to hurl something and yell, but instead, I sat perfectly still because I could feel something shifting inside me. This wasn't simply neglect. This was not mere dysfunction. My family chose to erase me, since facing the truth of their actions would have meant confronting themselves. If they could fabricate lies so smoothly, so believably, what else might they be keeping from me? I turned to Aunt Lorraine Barrett. Would it be all right if I stayed with her for a while, just until I could sort everything out? She gave a firm nod right away. That was the first time in months someone agreed to help me without strings attached. I gathered up the few belongings I owned. I left Riverbend Memorial Hospital, limping, with nothing but a folder bulging with trauma. But I was finished with being a ghost. When I made my next appearance, I was determined to have everyone's full attention. The occasion was my brother's engagement celebration. Naturally, it had to be that. Pristine white tablecloths covered the tables, champagne was stacked in glittering towers, and fairy lights twinkled above the patio, as if I'd wandered onto the set of a Hallmark film. The whole crowd had shown up. Megan Barrett, friends from Grace Fellowship Hall, former coaches, and familiar neighbors who assumed they understood us, though they truly did not. I paused just beyond the gate, my heart thundering so loudly it felt poised to leap from my chest. Clammy hands and shallow breaths gave me away. Still, fear wasn't with me. Not anymore. As I strode inside, faces gradually rotated toward me, toppling in sequence like dominoes. A fork clattered from someone's grip. Another person murmured my name. That's when my mother, Margot Blackwell, spotted me. She blanched to the point of appearing bloodless. Margot instantly edged backward and seized the nearest corner of the table for support. Lucas pivoted around, laughter still lingering on his lips as he offered a toast, until his gaze collided with mine. Mine? He choked on his words. His fiancée, Amelia Trent, placed her hand on his arm. "Who is that?" she murmured softly. He avoided her question. I strode directly through the middle of the patio, allowing the hush to grow around me like drifting smoke. My aunt, Aunt Lorraine Barrett, stood nearby. She gave a single nod. Just this once, my mother, Margot Blackwell, finally spoke, her voice quivering. "You seem healthy." I offered a precise, pointed smile. "You told everyone I disappeared on my own." Someone audibly gasped. One of the guests shifted in his seat, visibly uneasy. My father cleared his throat. "This isn't the right moment for—" "No," I interrupted. "This is exactly when it should be said." I faced the assembled guests. They lied and claimed I had run away, that I was unstable, a danger, an embarrassment. I let them sit with that for a moment. But that wasn't the truth. My tone was steady. My fingers didn't betray me. I survived a hit and run. I spent several weeks at Riverbend Memorial Hospital. No identification, no visitors, not even my name. They already knew. They were aware the entire time where I had been. Lucas parted his lips to speak. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Is that so?" I replied. "Because I can still see you driving in my mind." A heavy, expectant quiet settled over us. A voice muttered, "Did she really just say that?" I still recall that sweatshirt, the gathering that night, and the way the scent of beer clung to my words. My words wavered, not out of fear, but pure anger. And I recall exactly what my father said. "She shouldn't have been out there anyway." My father, Franklin Blackwell, moved closer to me. "Vivian, please, this is not appropriate." "No," my Aunt Lorraine Barrett said. "Let her finish," I said, and at that point I reached for my phone. "Does anyone want to hear what a real cover-up sounds like?" I pressed play. The audio message echoed over the patio for everyone to hear. My father's voice, drunk and hoarse, came through. "She's gone. Keep your mouth shut. You were drinking, and if this comes out, there's nothing I can do to help you." The atmosphere became utterly still. My brother began to retreat. Margot Blackwell, my mother, brought her hand up to her lips. I stared directly at my father, Franklin Blackwell. You didn't misplace me. You wiped me out. Then, addressing everyone gathered, I continued. This is the family that mourned for me, a daughter they willfully put from their memories. I left just as I had entered, on my own, but far from voiceless. This time, every person there listened to everything I said. It's often said that secrets decay from within. Apparently, reputations break down the same way. By sunrise, that voicemail had already been passed along, shared widely, even captured on screen recordings. A friend from Grace Fellowship Hall sent it over to her book club. One of my old teachers forwarded it to the District Education Council. Things moved quickly after that. My brother's position as a coach was over. It seemed clear that parents aren't keen on an assistant coach turning out to be the intoxicated driver in a hit and run, especially when his own sibling was the victim. Initially, the District Education Council tried to conceal everything, quietly. But then, the voicemail got out. Channel 5 updates caught the story. The headline read, "Family hidden away, hit-and-run case tied to a missing teenager." My father, Franklin Blackwell, was summoned to answer some questions. Charges of obstruction, carelessness, and evidence tampering were mentioned. He quickly hired a lawyer. That was only natural. But trying to fix things once the whole house is burning doesn't work. And my mother, Margot Blackwell, she unraveled. She attempted to organize another gathering for restoration, hoping to help people heal. No one bothered to show up. The folks next door quit acknowledging us. Members of Grace Fellowship Hall stopped picking up when she called. And Lucas Blackwell, my brother, reached out once and left a message of his own. You got your wish. All right. I wrecked everything for us. Absolutely not. They brought this on themselves. What I did was simply share what actually happened. 8 days later, a piece of mail with no sender showed up for me, addressed in rigid penmanship. Enclosed was a check, a substantial sum, and a single phrase scribbled on a jagged corner of notebook paper. I should have shielded you, Franklin Blackwell. I failed. I deposited the check. I put the note in a frame, not because it carried any sentimental value, but because it served as evidence. Evidence to me that even someone lacking courage can still recognize defeat. The reality hadn't merely shaken us, it emptied us from the inside out. Retribution wasn't something I was after. Pursuing a legal battle wasn't on my list of needs either. What I truly craved was the end of that suffocating quiet. When the time finally arrived, when every falsehood was shredded down to its barest remains, they had nothing left to hold on to. I moved 4 states away. A different name printed on the rental agreement, a new position waiting for me at Wild Fern Books and Gifts, a place scented with aged pages and fresh starts. My studio flat wasn't spacious, but it was all mine. No more shouting, no more acting, no anxious tiptoeing, just peace. Occasionally, old classmates would send me letters. Is any of this real? Are you safe? I always kept silent. Because this chapter of my story, what came after, wasn't theirs to claim. It was only ever mine. I completed my degree, got back online, resumed keeping a journal, and connected with Dr. Helen Kim, a therapist who didn't even blink when I insisted I wasn't simply gone. I was erased. My aunt, Lorraine Barrett, still sends small postcards to me, just little tokens. Mentions of local produce stands, vintage hauls, and her lemon bar recipe she promises I'll adore all turn up in her notes. She rarely writes more than a line or two. There's no need for her to elaborate. Nestled on my bookshelf, hidden between a pair of well-worn novels, sits a framed photograph. The picture holds my family. Me at 13, Lucas right next to me, Margot with her practiced grin, and Franklin upright and rigid as ever. I singed the corners of the photo. I only burned it enough to remind myself that everything had actually happened, and that I made it through. It wasn't about keeping the hurt, but about holding on to what was real. The truth didn't just break my chains, it made me whole again. I never wanted payback. What mattered was being free.